Hi, this is Cate Crowley. Welcome to Part 2 of Module 2, The Problem with Current Tests. We will continue discussing test misuse and significant inconsistencies across tests and reliability and validity issues with current assessments.
Some of us just misuse tests. So the HELP says in its manual it's a curriculum-based assessment, not a standardized test. It will not yield a definitive single age level or score. The main purpose is a curriculum assessment. Yet I see many evals that use the HELP to identify functional level. Really questioning. Its age ranges reflect when a skill or behavior typically begins, not when it is delayed. So anytime that skill a score on the HELP should indicate, you should probably add another 6 months to that, because it's just when the skill is emerging, not when it's fully acquired, and certainly not delayed. One of the things that surprised me, which is actually completely juxtaposed to that last statement, is the HELP strand language, which your developmental specialist would be using, says expressive language at 24 to 27 months, they should be producing the following sounds clearly. Pa, ba, ka, ga, wa, ha, ta, da. Yet, according to the research, the sounds are not considered late till at least 36 months, and some until 48 months. So how is the HELP using that to identify developmental delay at 27 months? It's just so flawed in terms of its understanding of the research. Don't use it. And then some people are using phonological processes, cluster reductions, fronting, backing, stopping. But according to the research by Grunwell, no child should be eligible for EI services based on phonological processes. Again, here's a nice chart that synthesizes the Grunwell work, and you'll see that up to age 3, phonological processes are appropriate. So then we have all these inconsistencies across the test. So now we're going to look at test inconsistencies. We looked at test bias. We looked at problems with the test items themselves according to the research. Now we're looking at significant inconsistencies. Remember I read you those Facebook pages? Really, when a skill develops depends on what test you choose. Let's look at body parts, which are not developmental, just so everybody knows. It's not that you say all over the world kids develop the ability to identify body parts. So the Rossetti says by 12 to 15 months you should know 3 to 6 body parts. The Real says by 18 months you should show the major body parts on your own body. But the Gilliam-Gorman says at 18 months just 1 body part is okay. The Daisy at 18 months you should know 3. The HELP, 19 months you only need 1. The Gilliam-Gorman at 24 months, 6 body parts. The Daisy at 24 months, 6 body parts. The ELAP at 24 months, 4 body parts. This is all over the map. At the HELP at 6 body parts at 24 months. The PLS-5 at 35 months, 4 body parts. And the HELP at 36 months, 6 body parts. So depending on where, at 15 months you could be delayed if you don't know 6 body parts. If you pull the Rossetti, or 18 months if you pull the Daisy. But if you choose the HELP or the PLS, you've got like another lifetime and a half for that child to be delayed. It's just unbelievable. Please do not use body parts to identify functional levels. It's a learned skill. And I will tell you one thing. Culturally, it resonates with me. When my best friend Sarah came over when my daughter was 3 days old, the first thing she did was to say how beautiful she was, which is what you do with a girl. Then she picked Caitlin up, and this is what she said. Eyes, nose, mouth, cheeks. She's the theatrical agent. But culturally, this is what you do. 3 days old. So kids, if my daughter didn't know her body parts at, eyes, nose, mouth, by 9 months, we'd probably wonder, right? It's a way of showing intelligence. It's not a way of showing intelligence. It's a way of showing learned skills. There's no magic in these tests. Then what about this? Let's look at this, significant body parts. Can you explain these differences? The Real says you need to point to your smaller body parts by the time you're 36 months. Now we're talking eyebrow, eyelash, elbow. But the PLS says you need these advanced body parts, which is funny to me, advanced, at 71 months. So actually you're almost, you can almost double your lifetime between the Real and the PLS-5 in terms of advanced body parts. Why is there such a discrepancy? Because body parts are not functional. Body parts are a result of having someone teach you body parts. They're not developmental. They're not functional. There's no magic. How about these differences? Parallel play. We think we all know about parallel play. The ELAP says you should be doing parallel play by 18 months. The HELP says by 20 months. The Gard-Gilman-Gorman, 24 months. And the Rossetti by 30 months. So if you pulled the Rossetti out on an 18-month-old kid and they were not doing parallel play, you'd be seeing a delay of 12 months. 12 months. But you pull the ELAP and it's age appropriate. Why do we have these significant test inconsistencies? Because of the fundamental flaws in the content validity of these tests that are not connected to evidence-based practice. And they assumed learned skills are developmental, which they are not. There's no magic. How about this? Understanding prepositions. The Rossetti says you got to understand prepositions at 15 months. Simple ones we're talking about. The Daisy at 18 months. The Gard-Gilman-Gorman at 24 months. So here the SLP pulls the Rossetti out. The kid is 24 months and they don't know prepositions. Woo! They've got a 9-month delay already. Woo! That's serious. Yes, throw them in. They're significant enough delay. The ELAP is 24 months. The PLS is 47 months. You got like 2 lifetimes between the Rossetti and the PLS-5 before that kid's going to be considered delayed. Now, think about a child, a little kid. They're in the high chair. They're eating pea soup. They throw it over the edge. They watch gravity happen. They watch everybody look at them and scream. Everything's happening. So we might let them do once or twice, maybe 3 times, depending on the family. But after a while, you're going to go, no, right? The question in this item is, when do they respond to no? Either they about to throw up, no, and they pause and they put it down. Or no, and they just throw it anyway. But they pause for a second, so you know they're responding to no. That's what you're looking for. That's developmental. This is not a bad test item. Let's see what happens. The Rossetti says at 6 to 9 months, a baby is responding to no by pausing or stopping the action most of the time. Gard-Gilman-Gorman says 6 to 9 months. The ELAP says 10 months. The REAL says 7 to 12 months. At least half the time or almost every time. The Daisy, 12 months. The HELP, 12 months. The Bayley, almost 17 months. And the PLS, 17 months. So again, even though the difference between 9 months and 17 months is 8 months, the child almost can live another lifetime. So what is it? What is the appropriate one? I'm not going to tell you. I know. How do I know? I know because I have informed clinical opinion. I've looked at a lot of kids over a lot of cultures, and I've watched when the parent says no, what happens? Now, some cultures, the kid then stops and then throws it over and laughs. Other kids, the parent says no and they put it down. They have a little fear in their eyes. That's cross cultures, within cultures. But if you don't know this, you need to look at typically developing kids because you do not have the informed clinical opinion. The tests are inconsistent, and yet depending on which one we pull out makes an enormous difference in what we call the child's functional level. What about this? Here's something else that's developmental. Turns head when name is called, right? So a baby's sitting there and they go, Caitlin, and the baby turns her head. Now, the Daisy says 3 to 6 months they should stop the activity. The ELAP, 3 months later. The Rossetti, 3 months after that. So the difference in the Daisy and the Rossetti is 6 months, an entire lifetime for a child. The Bayley says 12 and a half months, and the PLS says 17 months. So the PLS, the child could live 3 lifetimes. When does a child typically do something to indicate they know their name is called? Caitlin! Or, Caitlin! When is that time? Again, if you're an evaluator in early intervention, you need to know that through your informed clinical opinion because your tests are not giving you that information. You need to have informed clinical opinion. The only way you're going to get that is by looking at a bunch of kids and seeing what happens. Now, sometimes the kid's not going to respond, especially in an evaluation setting, because they don't know who you are. This is not a regular situation. And the child's not responding, but you mark off, oh, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. Why not ask the parent? Does the child respond when your name is called? Or ask the parent before you're doing the evaluation, before you go, say, could you just look for these, like, does the child respond when you call his name? Or stop? Does the child continue to throw the pea soup over when you say no? And you're gathering that information. That's how you develop your informed clinical opinion, and that's how you get quality information during an assessment. Tests lack precision. I just showed you the bias issues, socioeconomic, the cultural bias, the linguistic biases, that they're inconsistent in what they where they assess, that they sometimes are completely at odds with the research. That is why informed clinical opinion is so important in EI evaluations. Again, remember, current law, regs, and policies for EI evaluations reflect current best practices. And too many New York City Department of Health EI evaluations do not reflect current best practices. It depends on you all. The change needs to happen in the trenches. So let's talk now a little bit more about our concerns with some of the assessment materials. Now I can't go too far into the statistical analysis because of the nature of this training, but I'm going to touch on it. And those of you who have a background in this will understand what I'm talking about, and those who don't will at least get a sense that there's something more to look at. So let's just look at something fairly simple. The theoretical basis of the Real-III language, which is a language test, from the manual. So I took a picture of this little part of the manual that says, it's a very small manual. If you use it a lot, you should have it memorized. Just kidding. What's my concern? So here's the theoretical basis of the Real-III. And they said they want to use Bloom and Leahy's form, content, and use. Okay, that sounds great. Form, phonology, morphology, syntax. So form-wise, you're not going to get much morphology or syntax in EI child, because you're hoping they just put a couple of words together. The syntax, do they actually have appropriate word order? What dialect are you talking to the second language learners? That's all going to affect it. Morphology, as we know, most of them are looking at standard American English. That's what Bloom and Leahy looked at. Phonology, yeah, but remember that we looked at the phonological, when sounds are considered delayed, according to the research, and most of them are outside of 36 months. That's not to say children should have no sounds. That's a different question. So one question is, when are you supposed to have the k sound or the t sound? And are you impaired, or do you have a developmental delay? If you do not have it, that's one question. The answer is not if you're an EI kid, age-wise. The other question is, do they have any sounds, and what are they? That's what they need to have some of that, right? Two different questions. The tests don't look at those two different questions. They look at the first one, which is flawed. Pragmatics, okay. Looking at social skills, a way of using language and communication and interacting with people, whether it's language-based or not. But look at content. Content for the real is semantics, which is vocabulary and understanding vocabulary, the meanings of vocabulary and how they interact. When you're with an EI child, you're just looking at whether they have words, right? And maybe a little bit, do they put those words together, and what about, you look at other things, but semantics, just looking at the words, goes right back to earlier when I said that most of the EI tests focus primarily, virtually all of them, on vocabulary. And when you look at what the Real-III did in terms of saying what their theoretical basis was, content of Bloom and Leahy, they said, was words, and it's not words. It's attribution, it's existence. There's so many different ways of using words that doesn't have to do with interaction. How many different ways can they communicate, right? It's not words, it's not vocabulary. But the theoretical basis of this particular piece of the Real-III manual, stating their theoretical basis, shows how flawed the test is. All right, ELAP. The other problem with these tests is that they don't distinguish fine motor or cognitive delay. Now, in the first module, you saw little Maya, who was given this severe, really profound IQ because the evaluator didn't know how to distinguish fine motor from cognition. The ELAP cognitive assessment, here we are. It's almost all about fine motor. Can they get a peg from a bottle, then get a toy with a stick? Can they turn the pages? Now, we've talked about the bias issues in these as well, but here's all our motor stuff. Can they do a 3-form puzzle at 22 months? Oh my gosh. Can they imitate vertical line, horizontal, and circle? Of course, if they have had no experience with this, they may be at a bit of a disadvantage. Can they make a train of cubes? Can they build a tower? All of these are cognitive items, yet if a child has motor issues, their cognitive skills are going to test very low. That's what happened with Maya. Cognitive development refers to change over time in children's thinking, reasoning, use of language, problem solving, and learning, and their approaches to interactions with their physical and social environments. It includes intelligence, arousal, orientation, attention, executive functioning, memory, processing functions, content, imitation, cause and effect, reasonable thought, representational thought, reasoning, and concept formation, right? That's what cognition is. It's not about doing a 3-form puzzle with circle, square, and triangle. As I said, in my home, we had all these puzzles, from the big old one-knobbed puzzle to all the way up to the 500 and 1,000 puzzle pieces. We had all the ones in between for Caitlin. So she could do this. Now we're going to look at a little girl, 4 months old, Abigail, and have a look and think about her cognitive and motor development.
Ven para acá. Ven, mami. Ven, de este lado, ven. 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 Ven, mamá. Mira, está mirando los colores. Mira el amarillo, el rojo. Todos los colores, mami. Venga para acá. Ven, ven donde mami. Sí, mamá. Ven a donde mami, ven. Ven. Ven donde mami. Ven. Ven donde mami, ven. Ven. Ven, dame. Ven. Ven donde mami, mamá. ¿Sí? ¡Ah! ¡Wow! Tócalo de nuevo. Tócalo de nuevo.
So what you see from this video is little Abigail. She's listening to her mom. She's exploring how to turn over. She's reaching up and she's hitting the toy above her. She's got all these things going on. She's hearing language. She's learning. She wants to try again and again and again. That's cognitive and motor development put together. Some items on these tests just make me cry. The daisy, do you whisper at 24 to 30 months? There's no developmental age for whispering. The daisy also says uses sentences of 3 or more words at 24 months to 30 months, but I'm not really sure that's appropriate. 3 or more words, you're really asking for small sentences. I think you should be looking at something other than sentences. Or names 5 or more objects spontaneously. That would be like computer, camera, light. No kid would do that. Does he name things spontaneously? Now, naming is culturally very appropriate in my culture. Oh, we're looking at a book and the kid says, it's a plane, Mommy, it's a plane. No, honey, that's a helicopter. Can you say helicopter? And we go through a lot of naming. Well, eyes, nose, mouth, eyebrows, elbows. That's all about naming. Colors, circle, square, triangle. Shapes. I did that one. Colors, red, blue, green. Shapes, circle, square, triangle. It's all about labeling. But it's not developmental. And certainly, even kids from my mainstream American middle class culture are not going to walk around labeling things. It's just weird. So now we're going to look a little bit at standard error of measurement and statistics. And some of you love this and some of you hate this, but I've tried to make it very easy to understand. Let's just put it that way. So standard error of measurement is the imprecision in a test. Every test, every research article that you've ever written has error in it, meaning that if you give the test the same child a few times, they're going to come up with different results. If the same evaluator gives it a few times, so it's within reliability standard error of measurement, but it's a statistical quantification of that error. Now, remember, according to the EI agreement, provider agreement, the New York State one, we're supposed to be able to adhere to recognized professional standards, including scoring of clinical procedures and standardized instruments. You may go, I don't understand this, but let's talk about standard error measurement in a case many of us have been overexposed to, which is the political election of 2016. So here we have Donald Trump and Ben Carson. And this is a while ago, but Donald Trump and Ben Carson, Trump had 27%, Carson was within striking distance, he had 23%. The margin of error was 6 percentage points plus or minus. Those 6 percentage points, that margin of error, is your standard error of measurement. So Trump had 27% support, so they used 95% in polls. We're 95% sure Trump's true percentage points was between 21% and 33%. And Ben Carson's true performance was between 17% and 29%. Because Trump and Carson crossed over, their confidence intervals, their standard error of measurement crossed over, we can't say who's ahead. And that's standard error of measurement. The polls use them all the time. Our DAISY, let's have a look at the DAISY. Now, score of 70, 2 standard deviations below the mean. But if we want to be 95% sure that that is a true score, the true range for the DAISY in expressive language is plus or minus 10 standard scores, meaning that to be 90, if a child gets a score of 70 on the DAISY, we're 95% sure that child's true score falls somewhere between 60, clearly eligible, and 80, clearly not eligible. Receptive language, here we have clearly eligible, 51%, and not eligible, 82.9%. Fine motor, same as expressive language. We're 95% sure if a child gets a score of 70 on the DAISY in fine motor, their true scores lie somewhere between a 60 and an 80. And gross motor is, again, a slightly narrower band. But still, we're looking at would qualify and would not qualify. That's what standard error measurement tells us in these tests. In the domains, score of 70, 95% confidence. Here we have it for the various domains. Here's the real. This is the standard error of measurement for the real based on ages, and you can see where the table is. You got to know this stuff if you're using these tests. So if you are 14 months, language ability, you're 95% confident that child's true score falls within a range plus or minus 7.83. It's a very wide range, more than one standard deviation. So the real, if a child receives a score of 70 on the real, we're 95% sure, language composite, his true score falls between a 62 and a 77. In other words, somewhere between very severe delay and 25% delay, but that probably wouldn't even qualify. That's what you know with a score of 70, if you know what these tests are really telling you. So how can this range be so wide? The real and virtually all tests say something like this. A couple of them don't, like the ELAP, which I don't know why anybody would use that except it's inexpensive. And the real says, too often examiners forget the dictum. This is quoting from the real. The tests don't diagnose, people do. Here's your your informed clinical opinion. And base their diagnosis exclusively on the results of the specific test. However, test results are merely observations, not diagnoses. Test results make useful contributions to diagnoses, but in the end, practice diagnosis rests on the clinical skills and experience of examiners, your informed clinical opinion. Test results are merely aids to clinical judgment. And this is by a test that, as you see from this past, all the slides that I've showed you in Module 2, is a test that's quite flawed. Certainly can't use it across all languages. The ELAP, I'm going to let you have a look at the ELAP. It's shocking, the ELAP. So, given the quality of these tests, evaluations must be less focused on how the child did on each task, on a test, or on test scores. Informed clinical opinion is vital. And if you don't have it, like if you don't know when a baby responds to no by either pausing or stopping, and you don't know that and you're doing the EIODs, stop doing them, or immediately get to work on developing your clinical opinion. If you don't know when a child typically responds to their name, just by pausing even, or turning, you've got to work on your informed clinical opinion. And just by calling the kid's name in an evaluation in their home by you or by the mom, the kid is already in a weird state. You got a stranger there. The mom's probably talking about the kid, about the problems they're seeing. That's not going to tell you much because the sociolinguistic quality of that interaction is so shifted because of you being there and creating the situation where the child's weaknesses are the focus. So here again, the tests. Will the Bureau of Early Intervention accept multidisciplinary evals where there's no standardized test used to establish a developmental delay? Yes. Are evaluators required to use a standardized test for an English-speaking child? No. You can read this. Again, more information is available at Leaders Project, Grammar Fundamentals, Differential Diagnosis in Preschool Evals, School Age Disability Evaluation, a 13-year-old. There's model speech, language, and psychological evaluations posted, and there's test reviews of the most commonly used tests.